Please note, we would like to make it very clear, we are totally against the form of discipline described in the articles and accounts being used on minors and non-consenting adults. Although some of these accounts are fictional, and others may be an exaggerated reality, none of them are too far from the truth of what really happened back in those days. If you are enjoying our stories, please do subscribe to this channel. We will be posting many more stories as time goes by.
Meeting old school teachers. Has anyone ever met up with an old school teacher who spanked them during the school days? If so, did you discuss things with them or were you too embarrassed? I met the headmaster of my prep school at the school's fete with my younger brother, who is 2 years younger and was still at the school, and my parents. He had caned me twice in the past, the last time about 2 years before. He asked me how I was getting on at my new school, etc., etc. And had a quick chat with my parents. The caning was never mentioned, of course, and at the time my parents did not know that the kindly old man they were talking to had whacked their son's bottom. No letters home from private schools, it was a matter between you and the headmaster, quite right too. The deputy head who caned me on my hands at my state school lived in the same town, and I saw him occasionally in the town and once or twice in local pubs, etc. I always said hello and asked him how he was, etc. He moved away when he retired and I have not seen him for years. It is quite likely that neither man could remember caning me anyway. They must have both whacked a lot of boys over the years and it was certainly nothing special or unusual. I was spanked by the headmistress at my infant school. For a 7-year-old who wasn't smacked at home, it was a painful experience. Regardless of that, I remembered her as a scary woman who generally shouted and stamped her foot a lot. She seemed to pick us up on the most trivial matters and was the archetypal dragon. About 9 years later, aged 15/16, I attended the opening of new school building at my old infant school. She was still the headmistress. 2 things struck me. First, that I was now bigger and taller than her and it seemed ridiculous that I had ever fitted across her lap for a spanking. The second was that this dragon was smiling and chatting to the various guests present and actually appeared to be a civilized human being. I also wondered if she still used the same methods of discipline, as it was now 1983 or 1984 and CP, though still legal, seemed to be on the wane in most schools. From the US. I ran into the principal that paddled me I think about 9 times in junior high. A couple of those were the whole class for just a couple whacks. My worst was 10, for fighting. Anyway, it was a few years later, I was in college. We just said hello, etc. I do remember thinking he seemed a lot smaller than I remembered. A friend has a son at the school. He said he's still whacking. Private school parents sign a letter. Years after leaving school, I was at a county show and met a female teacher who'd caned me, but I was far too embarrassed to remind her of it. I bet she'd forgotten anyway. I was caned on 4 occasions by the senior mistress of the girls' grammar I attended in the early 60s. She operated a knickers-only rule and the process was both humiliating and very painful, particularly aged nearly 18. I attended a reunion to mark the conversion of the school to a mixed comprehensive about 15 years later. She was there having retired some years earlier and we had a great laugh about the old times and even the dreadful brown knickers. I was too embarrassed to ask if she remembered giving me the cane, but I'm sure she did. Old teachers never forget, that's me speaking from experience. Regarding knowing teachers or principals whom you encountered outside the school setting, my dad was the principal at my junior high school and often paddled students sent to him to be disciplined for misbehaving. When I got sent to his office along with several of my buddies for acting up in school, I was treated exactly the same as my fellow miscreants, 3 licks of the paddle. I have never run into an old teacher. There are a few it would be great to see. However, if I ran into Shelfie or a certain grade school teacher, it would, up until a few years ago, resulted in bloodshed. Today I don't think so. But if the subject of CP came up, I don't know. I had a great coach who was also our assistant principal in middle school. I was often sent out of class and would have to stand in the hall. He would often come by and know I had done something wrong for being sent out of class. He would have his paddle in his hand and take me to the boys' bathroom or give me 3 licks in the hall. I think from 6th grade through 8th grade he paddled me at least 15 times. I later was a science teacher and baseball coach at the same middle school where he had become principal. Once while he paddled a boy in the 7th grade and I was his witness, he told me this was like old times. I'd like to run into a few of my old teachers with my car. This is not strictly relevant to the thread but may be of interest. As a young adult I served on 2 committees with my old headmaster, but as he never caned me, I suppose it does not count. I am still a member of a committee of a voluntary organisation on which sits an 85-year-old woman who occasionally taught me at senior school, usually if the regular teacher was away. Of the 11 members of the committee, 9 are female, all aged over 60. Madam President is the retired headmistress of a local junior school. Whenever the issue of child behaviour has been raised, her response is to say that she never had any discipline problems because I kept a slipper in my desk drawer. This always causes giggles and laughter from all the other female committee members. I think this demonstrates the attitude of a Seton generation to corporal punishment. I had a teacher in infants who spanked me across her knee when I was 7. I have already posted the story on here, but years later I would still see her round town where I lived. I held no malice against her for what she did, as she must have thought it appropriate. I never asked her about if she remembered it, as she would have long forgotten. Anyhow, she is no longer with us now. I think that sort of thing may have happened to quite a few people in the days when teachers tended to live near the schools they taught in. Nowadays, of course, they live as far from the school as possible and drive varied and circuitous routes home, taking precautions in case a disgruntled kid or aggrieved parent follows them to find where they live with a view to burning their house down. It wasn't like that when I was at primary school. I knew where all my teachers lived, everybody did. In those days teachers lived locally and had status in the community, not far behind doctors and priests. After I started secondary school I became acquainted with a boy from outside the town I lived in. One day I accompanied him when he was calling on his aunt, who lived in my town. She turned out to be none other than Miss B, who 5 years before had administered the smacked leg which caused my aversion to being in receipt of SCP, and had then been my class teacher the following year. She certainly remembered me. I doubt she remembered the smacked leg. Miss B smacked lots of legs. There was a queue the time I got mine, and I witnessed several more while in her class. If she did remember it, she fortunately didn't say anything in front of her nephew. That wasn't the only coincidence though. A year or 2 after that I got quite friendly with a boy who lived locally but went to a different secondary school. In that case I knew exactly what I was getting into. His mother was Mrs. S, who was my class teacher at the time I got my leg smacked. As I've noted here in other posts, I was the first person in my year group to get corporal punishment at primary school, but another boy and a girl from Mrs. S.'s class were just behind me in the queue. When we returned there still in tears after being punished, Mrs. S made us stand hands on heads in front of the class while she took the opportunity to explain to our classmates that we'd been smacked and that was what would happen to naughty boys and girls as we moved up the school. A necessary lesson perhaps, both the smacking and the lecture. In the event I took good care it didn't happen to me again. Not so all my classmates. The girl whose severe slippering in our last year of primary school made a big impression on me was one of those who witnessed our discomfiture and heard Mrs. S.'s little lecture. Mrs. S herself was actually a lovely lady and a dedicated teacher. She never mentioned past failings either and was very kind to me whenever I visited her house with her son.